I ask the other commissioners to introduce themselves.
Jim Walsh.
Gregory Peterson.
Evelyn Aquila.
And would the staff introduce themselves, please?
Bob Brennan.
Liz Hogan.
Bill McCann.
John Conklin.
Pat Campion.
Anna Savitro.
Joe Birds. Paul Collins.
Kim Galvin.
Todd Valentine.
Bob Warren, Election Operations.
And our guests, please.
Greg Jones, Commission on Quality of Care and Advocacy for Persons with Disability.
My name is Sam Sloan. Somebody circulated a petition for me for governor. And this is my girlfriend who speaks almost no English. Say your name.
Welcome.
Michael Davis, Republican Assembly Campaign Committee.
Tom Polker, Democratic State Vice Chair.
Tom Conley, Citizen.
Bob Grunstack, NYSTEC.
Bill Sackford, NYSTEC.
Welcome to our guests. The first order of business is approval of the minutes of August 5th. Any comments? All right, so moved. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are adopted. The next order of business is to deal with our petition rulings. Kim Galvin and Paul Collins.
Commissioners, I believe you have in your packet a chart setting forth the individual staff recommendations regarding the petition, objections, or any prima facie review that we had done for any of the petitions that were lacking acceptances in this round of the independent nominating petitions. I believe that the chart itself is somewhat self-explanatory. If anybody has any questions, otherwise I would simply ask that the commissioners adopt the recommendations of the staff for the determinations that will be sent out.
Thank you. I think it's pretty clear.
Thank you.
So moved.
Is there anybody who wants to be heard on the staff recommendations?
Oh, my name is Sam Sloan. I just want to know what the recommendation was about my petition.
Kim?
The staff recommendation with regard to your petition is that it was invalid by reason of an insufficient number of signatures filed.
Yeah, I just want to explain to somebody, if you don't mind, for just 1 second. There was a split. I'm with the Libertarian Party. I've been a member of the party since 1974. There was a split in the party this year. There was the Queens Libertarian Party circulated petitions with my name as a candidate for governor. Mostly Manhattan Libertarian Party submitted petitions for another person as candidate for governor. The petitions were basically identical in all respects except for the name on the top.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, that's true. I never actually saw any of the petitions, frankly. I didn't circulate them myself. I don't know, if they were mixed up together, if they were all submitted at one time, or I just don't know. But what I find disturbing is that the fact that the other person is not a member of our party. He's never paid dues. He's never come to our meetings. He's just completely an internet scammer who does this all the time. Who just tries to get his name on the ballot so he can get hits on his website. He's not really a legitimate candidate at all, and the whole party is in turmoil over this thing because we've never done that. We've always had members of our party as our candidates. We've never had, like they say, a Republican or Democrat or another major party candidate as our candidate. We just wanted our own libertarian people on there, and this is the first time this precedent has changed. So it's very disturbing to our party because we felt that this year was finally the year that we would actually have a chance to make a dent because of the turmoil in the top levels. Thank you.
Mr. Sloan, we appreciate you coming all the way to Albany to attend the meeting, so that's why we've heard you. But there's really nothing we can do. That we're just a ministerial agency, and we review the petitions to apply the provisions of the election law, and therefore our rulings are based on just applying the statute as it's written. All right, so there's a motion to approve the report. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so the report is approved. Next order of business are the reports. We'll start with the report of the co-executive directors.
The
major time of the entire agency since the last meeting has been, of course, the independent nominations. There were a number of them, substantial, statewide, and to review the documents that came with them, as well as the numerous challenges to those petitions in order to get the staff reports ready for this meeting. That being said, preparing the calls for the county, et cetera, took a substantial amount of time for everyone in the agency. So between the primary, the independent petitions, and the work with the court cases ongoing related to, they seem to come in in bushel baskets every day as opposed to one or two every now and then. So everybody's been doing a great job on behalf of the whole agency to make sure that we had the work done so that we could have quality hearings and timely hearings so that we could present this report to you today. So I think on my own self, I'm sure Todd would agree, I think everybody pitched in and did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, that's one side of it is the voters, and we also continue to, we'll get a report at some point in the future, we just don't have it yet, on how the new implementation of our Military and Overseas Voter Act system, which doesn't really have a nice name other than, we're at this point, I don't know if we have a report on how many people have utilized the system. I mean, it's available, it's up and running, the training was done, but it's still, this is round one, was, the issues with this primary election, and now we have to go on to, getting ready for the general election. So that'll keep us busy for the next few weeks.
Many men in the military do want to vote.
Mm-hmm.
I know that from my nephew, and he's in Pearl Harbor. And he
Yeah,
wants
no,
to
we
vote.
think the system will be very
And he's
good.
very happy he gets his ballot. So I think that'd be,
We're here to help.
All right, thank you. We'll move to the report on legal from Kim Galvin.
Thank you, Commissioner. As Bob and Todd both said, there's many petition cases. I think we had an excess of 65 or 68 or something like that. Many of them are still ongoing. I think most will be resolved by our board's action today. Many have been adjourned, just reserving their rights. In addition to those many petition cases, plus I anticipate there'll be a slew as a result of what we do here today. But in addition to those petition cases, Paul has been handling some, significant legislation for the board in Nassau County that perhaps he would like to give you an update on after I'm done. And then other than that, we've just been doing the ordinary business of the unit and assisting the other units best we can with regard to phone calls or inquiries, and doing our best to keep the Department of Justice apprised of the developments with regard to the use of the machines in this past primary election. And I don't know if Paul wanted to tell them what happened in Nassau most recently.
Yeah, very, very briefly, the circuit affirmed Judge Sharp's injunction. Nassau was obligated to roll out the new machines, which they did. And that's a good sign. They still are proceeding with, or at least as of yesterday, we're still proceeding with their state court action to have IRMA, the state legislative implementation of HAVA in New York, declared unconstitutional. That will play out as it plays out. And there are motions before that court to dismiss that case, and also motions to change venue. And there probably, I think the judge has about 4 different motions pending at this time. Also, in that case, there are issues of production of documents that probably we might wish to discuss in executive session, because there's some language on orders, etc. In addition to those litigations, we have 2 Brennan Center litigations, one of which Joel Graber from the Attorney General's office is representing us in, and the other one was just filed within the past couple of days, and it would be my request to the board that they authorize that the Attorney General represent the agency in that as well, because that is strictly a determination of whether a state statute is unconstitutional or constitutional.
Well, I think when we were in Nassau, we were pleasantly surprised at how hard they were working there to get things done and do it right. I really wanted to thank Bob. You were with us, and
I talked
the three of us were there.
with John Ferry from our election operations unit was in that area on election day also. You know, my own observation was, you know, they worked very hard to put together a strong effort. The polling site we visited, the people were very comfortable with opening the polls and understanding the paperwork, and they had a very nice setup. It was early in the day, and there weren't many voters that had gone through that site at that time, but the staff was very comfortable. They had no problems opening. While we were there weren't any voters that came into that site, so I couldn't ask anybody of the voters. But the board had a very good operation. We went to the control room where they were taking calls. They seemed to be very comfortable with the logging of the calls that they had were routine type of issues. And they were gearing up as one of the counties that actually took the results at the end of the night using the new portable memory devices, which we think is a more accurate way of recording the numbers as opposed to the old way of taking the tape, transcribing the numbers, and then transcribing them again into some other system. It was kind of ripe for human errors that could happen along the way. And John Ferry, that was the issue I asked John this morning. How did that go? Because when we were there, they're all nervous. You know, what happens at the end of the night? We're relying on this to work. And they said it would really work very well. They had it well organized. The materials came into their secure area. They logged it. They put them into a spot. They brought them into the room, and it really worked quickly. And I think it's a good message. We asked, let us know how that works, because I think it's a good message at the close of poll that we really didn't have a lot of experience in the pilot program. Only one county in the pilot used it last year. To really get reliable numbers quickly. So I think not only did they roll the stuff out, but they really did a great job at the end of the night to change the way that they always recorded the results. They came in a little bit later than they were used to getting them, but they came in a way that was much more reliable than they ever had before. So we haven't heard back from the board itself, but I thought they did a great job.
They had an excellent operations unit, Larry, there, and they had some very, very bright young people who looked like they really knew what they were doing, and I was impressed.
They did look like they hadn't had much sleep, though.
No, they looked exhausted. They did.
Could I just add, too, that I know that there's a lot of counties watching, and because we're talking about Nassau and the extraordinary effort they put forth, it would be almost remiss if we didn't say that all the other counties that haven't been such a problem up until this point
absolutely.
we're all working as hard and did the same things as well. So
no,
I didn't want them to think,
I think we're talking about Nassau because we really expected, truthfully, I can only speak for myself, I expected the worst because I thought they were resisting everything because of the lawsuit and the way they had been communicating with us. I really expected to go out there and find nothing happening, and I suppose when you see something is happening good, that it's even better. But I did say, I must say, we can talk about some other counties too.
It was more than something. I thought Nassau did an excellent job from what I saw.
Did.
That they clearly had put in a good faith effort to.
Maybe they didn't want to disappoint Frank here.
No, it worked well. There were some glitches at the individual EDs, but on the whole it worked, and it was a good dry run in the sense that there was about 10% of the people came out to vote, and at least on the election board end of it, they worked out a lot of the glitches. I mean, in my particular area, they had 3 machines that had their jammed paper that didn't print out or printed out wrong. So they put the roll in wrong. Things like that can certainly be corrected, and with additional training, I think a lot of those problems will be obviated.
I agree with you.
And I think that's the consensus statewide that those counties that had done the pilot are a little bit further along than the counties that did it for the first time, but that it's working subject to lots of glitches. Nobody's going to say it's perfect.
When New Yorkers have their backs to the wall, they fight.
All right. Paul specifically asked for authorization to have the Office of the Attorney General represent us in the lawsuit brought by the Conservative Party and the Working Families Party to challenge the constitutionality of election law section 7-112? 9-112. We can discuss that in executive session. I think I'd like to discuss the how we're going to respond to the lawsuit in executive session anyway. Or we could just vote the authorization now and still have our discussion later.
That's good, we'll do that.
Yeah.
We can do that, and then we have the discussion in executive
All
session.
right, so those in favor of asking the Attorney General to represent us in that lawsuit, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so that's done, and then we'll take up the substantive issues in the executive session.
Thank you.
Anything else on legal?
No, sir.
All right. Then we'll turn to election operations.
Well, I don't have much to add to the operations report that Kim and Bob just gave, so I guess on behalf of ops, we spent a lot of time on the phone with county boards dealing with building ballots. This is the first time they had that responsibility, so we had a help desk set up. We had a lot of staff dedicated to assisting the county boards in that regard. We think overall it went very well. We had people in 15 counties on primary day. Some of them just got back yesterday, so we haven't had a chance for a proper debriefing of the staff. But we will have a report for you at the next meeting, and if there's anything monumental in our conversations, we'll share those with Todd and Bob in the interim. But we do feel that equipment worked the way that people expected it to work. I think we're concerned that there be more hands-on training for inspectors. Inspectors are being overly helpful. It's a new system. They think voters are not familiar with it. So we have had, as we did in the pilot, and we cautioned against, inspectors taking ballots from voters and putting them into scanners, standing too close to the scanner, reviewing a voter's ballot if they want it spoiled in one another. So they're trying to understand the problems, but they have to do that at a distance so that voters are still afforded the privacy that they are entitled to. So we'll be making that part of our report as well. Other than that, we have ballot configuration issues, which, as you know, we've talked about in-house, and we're hoping to deal with those after the general election and revisit ballot design by way of usability and other issues. So that's on our horizon as well. I do want to thank the staff here that worked on specs. We had 64 sets of objections that were filed with us. 23 sets of specifications were filed, and that's a lot of work, as Kim and the two directors alluded to. And we had staff from almost every unit helping us out, working late at night. They balked at a Saturday, so we didn't push the issue, but they understood the timeliness of getting that work done and accommodated us very well in that regard. We did have acceptance testing that finished up just prior to the primary for the remainder of the scanners that were required in New York City for backup purposes. We do have a couple of new orders for additional units coming in, one from Oswego, and that's actually been filed with OGS, so we do expect that we'll have some more units, and perhaps boards, once they've reflected on the use of the systems on Tuesday, especially those boards that weren't in the pilot, might be reconsidering the number of units they ordered and making some changes there. Other than that, do we have anything else, John?
Anna, could you address the logic and accuracy testing issues that came up with New York City?
The logic and accuracy testing in New York City, we are constantly revisiting our procedure and our formula for calculating test decks. But in New York City, we had issues of the length and the repetition of certain test decks, and had they followed our formula exactly the way our procedure required, they would not have had time to put voting systems out into the community, and not, if they had, they would have been with out that testing, which we are absolutely not enamored of as far as a proposal goes. So we did listen to their request to modify how test decks were run. We understood their issue. We understood our solution. We met with Bob Warren and staff in-house and discussed it at some length and did advise them that in the primary election, they could make that change to the formula in the test deck and abbreviate the testing so that there wasn't the repetitive work being done.
And let's break it down. First of all, the city gave the state board the request last Tuesday, right?
Right.
And it was Tuesday night, 5 o'clock on Tuesday. 7 o'clock?
It was late Tuesday.
My understanding is that we only abbreviated the testing for the ballot marking devices.
Right.
But not for the scanners.
No, the logic and accuracy, the comprehensive test decks, those formulas were not modified at all. It's the additional work and time involved in creating ballots on the BMD that impacted using those ballots as part of the logic and accuracy test. So that is the accommodation that was made in the city. By no means were the comprehensive test decks diminished in any way.
And so I guess I want to stress that that there was a strong consensus, both of the staff and the commissioners at the state board, that we did not compromise the logic and accuracy testing of the scanners at all in the accommodation that we did with the city, that it was really related to the ballot marking devices, part of which arose out of the complexity of the ballot in New York City, because they had a number of judicial delegate primaries, which in a typical judicial delegate primary, you're adding 90 positions to the ballot when you include the write-ins, the delegates, and the alternates of each of the competing slates. And that when you go through every possible combination of those 90 additional, that it exponentially creates a huge amount of additional possibilities that the time and effort on a ballot marking device to test those out is disproportionate to the security issues that are raised, which are negligible because all the ballot marking device does is mark a ballot, does not count the ballot.
Ballot rotation impacts that as well, and that's clearly...
Language rotation and a large number of JD delegates.
So in any event, I wanted to stress that, one, we did not compromise on the logic and accuracy testing with respect to the scanners, and two, that it was only doing what I think we agreed was a more appropriate testing for the ballot marking devices in view of the complexity of the ballot, that our regulations were overly severe for the ballot marking.
It's procedure more than a regulation, but what we looked to make sure that all of the functionality, the screens, the languages, the devices on the AutoMark were being all adequately tested, and the question was how many ballots needed to be accomplished in order to get a comfortable level of testing. But we did not compromise on testing every functionality on the AutoMark. It was just the number of ballots it took to complete that.
Right. And we'll look at it after the election, but I think, again, the consensus was that we will probably revise the procedures to make that permanent and not just it's not just a special exception for that.
We did approve them for the primary. We told them we'd reconsider for the general as well, but I think moving beyond that point, our philosophy with test decks has been based on the concept that the ballots and our experience with them, because clearly there wasn't any kind of a test deck being conducted on a lever machine. I don't think I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. But our process was that the ballot was already built in the absentee world, which is our only op-scan experience here in New York. And the ballot was already built and configured. You then had to program the ballot from the printed document. What we're doing now is doing all of that programming first. So you're testing what you've configured as you go through building the ballot. The printing of it is the end result now. In the absentee world, it was the starting point. So we really need to rethink our approach to test decks, and we've been modifying that formula all along, but now we really need to modify how we think about it, and I think you'll see a big change in what constitutes a test deck without compromising any of the logic and accuracy at all, because the building blocks have been completely reversed in the world that we're in today, as opposed to where we were last year at this time.
Yeah.
So
There's
that's,
There's a difference that we were comfortable talking about. The automark starts with a printed ballot. The EMS makes, the configuration of the software, and it creates the PDF to print the printed ballot. I think we are not quite there yet to do the same change in the Dominion side, because that starts with a blank ballot that the system then has. So we still have to print those extra ballots in the Dominion world in order to make sure that the system properly creates the ballot that we expect it to make. But on the automark side, since it starts with a printed ballot and it only marks the ovals, we could do fewer tests to make sure that we had passed fewer pieces of paper through in order to be adequately assured that it was working.
Yeah, and during the pilot project last year, there was one source code issue that came out on the first use of the image cast. Were there any ballot configuration or source code issues that came up in this last primary election?
we had none of those kinds of trouble calls at all, none of those reports from our county boards, the systems. They did have a unit here and there that failed. They had brought in replacement units, but nothing that rose to that level that we experienced last year.
Do we know the reasons for the failures?
We're still working on those. We got a little bit of a trouble call on election day, but now that they have their scanners back from the poll sites and can look at the results and see what happened and interview their inspectors, we'll be having those conversations with the county boards, over the next several days.
But at this time, you're not aware of a single ballot configuration issue that came up
No.
during the primary?
No.
I think that's a tremendous advance, and that's something we never had with the lever machines. I can't remember a single lever machine election where we didn't have some ballot configuration issues.
We did have some test ballots that were left in the ballot box, that kind of thing, but again, those are people issues. Those aren't, a functionality of the machine. They don't compromise the integrity at all. Everybody understands that the ballot box has to be empty. If there are issues with the memory cards, the technician staff at the county board have crash kits. They can get out to these sites and make those changes, but nothing that rose to that level that we encountered
May I
last
say this,
year.
Anna? In New York City, when we were in the Bronx, a couple of the inspectors said they had a machine that failed, but they said they could not get over that the technician got there so fast.
Mhm.
And they said, I remember waiting 2 hours where we waited 10 minutes, and that was a big plus.
We've really, encouraged the counties, and if they've read
A
the pilot
machine is
reports-
machine. When you have thousands of machines, one or two, somewhere, you're going to have a problem. There's no way you're going to get away with it.
I know our press in Albany is a little bit different than the New York City press, but in Albany, they reported that New York City experienced some issues in 15 polling places, and we thought, wow.
15 out of
15
1,300.
and 18.
Yeah, 1,300, right,
Last
right.
year with leverage, so
Unfortunately,
we were very pleased. The New York
one was
press is a little bit
Bloomberg's and
different.
one was Senator Schumer's.
But trust me, it was more than 15.
I can imagine.
I do think that New York City did much better than they're being given credit for
Right.
in the press.
Absolutely.
I can't help but note one of the things that is very unfair, that Mayor Bloomberg was attacking the City Board of Elections while ignoring that most of the machines that could not be opened on time were because the police department had failed to deliver the keys. And Mayor Bloomberg perhaps forgets
Right.
that the police department reports to him and not to the Board of Elections. And I think that was very unfair that he didn't start with analyzing how the people who report directly to him had contributed to some of the problems that New York City experienced.
Plus the budget issue. The budget issue.
Well, and the budget issue is a big one.
Yeah.
The city board did ask for more resources to do better training and to increase inspector pay. My own evaluation is that what they spent, that what they did was good enough. It could have been better, and the public
I give them a B.
concern. They forget that a lot of the things that would make the system perfect in an ideal world are costly. So that, yes, everybody was well aware that we could have had bigger ballots, but would have added 1/3 to the cost of purchasing the voting machines to have a wider scanner.
24-inch.
We could have done more inspector training, but the cost would have added millions and millions to the cost of preparing the election. And we could have curtained privacy booths, which would also add significantly to the cost of the election. And the decision was basically made was this is how much we're going to spend, and try to do it, try to make our dollars as effective as possible. The one disappointment that I have is that there isn't greater attention given to the ballot marking devices. Congress mandated that we have these a system fully accessible to the disabled. Not only the disabled, anyone can use the ballot marking device, and certainly anyone who feels that the ballot is too small to read would be greatly assisted by using the ballot marking devices, and the ballot marking devices are underused at this point. And
They have this idea that it's only for disabled people, and therefore it's very hard to encourage them to say, let the people use the ballot marking device.
all right, so last thing, Anna, is if you do hear of any ballot configuration issues that come up, would you please let us know, so that if there's a change that we're not taken by surprise, that in fact it wasn't 100% on the ballot configuration.
May I just say this, to open up some of the polls, some of the school custodians didn't realize it was 5:30 in the morning, they were supposed to be there. And the inspectors waited outside, so there's a lot of things.
Well, and that's nothing new.
No,
That
I
always
know
happened
that's
with the Lieber
nothing new,
machines,
but
too.
it's just one of those things.
All right, well, thank you, Anna, and thanks to everyone throughout the state who worked so hard on
To our whole staff.
running that election. John Conklin, Public Information.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I guess really the only thing I need to add to the written report is the discussion of press coverage from the election, and I think we've touched on a lot of that already. I would say that I would try to provide some perspective in my comments that as a statewide organization, the election went very, very well despite what was in the New York City press, and that there are issues there that need to be taken into account when reading those things. The mayor's rocky relationship with the New York City Board of Elections, those comments should always be taken with a grain of salt. Issues around resources that they've argued over for years, that kind of stuff. For the public information part, we probably got about 25 emails on election-related issues. I would say they fell into 3 categories. One was, I don't like this new machine, which is, a complaint of a kind, but not something that necessarily is actionable for us. A specific issue that happened that may have been a deviation from our recommended procedures that we'll follow up with, or a complaint on a procedure that had nothing to do with the new machines, but would have been a routine election day matter that could have happened on any election day at any time. So we'll be following up with those. Anna, I'll forward some of those to Anna so she can address them as well. So, but that's all I have.
All right, thank you, John. We'll turn to campaign finance. Elizabeth Hogan.
Thank you, Commissioners. A review of the written report that I submitted relative to campaign finance is, as I usually do, give you an update as to the volume and the increasing numbers of different responsibilities that we're having in the office, from telephone calls to mail to, all those kinds of things. And I tried also in the report to give you a reference to the projects that different staff are working on, different audits. Their education and training staff has some specific projects that they're working on at this time. Additionally, of course, in the midst of the primary and the election, we're faced with 6 financial disclosure reports to be filed specific to those elections. Last week, the July periodic judgment was signed. We sued 443 people for not filing the July periodic. Today, the 32-day pre-primary order to show cause bill took to court and had it signed. On the 29th, we'll be submitting the order to show cause for the 11-day pre-primary. Next week, the 10-day post-primary financial report is due. And then subsequent to that, there are 3 general election reports due between October 1st and the end of November. And all of those, of course, with the different stages of the lawsuits that we'll engage in to see them through. Generally speaking, that's about all, unless you have any specific questions. And Bill, if you want to add anything.
Liz, you had one big victory in court. You want to, on the
Discuss it.
Nysboe lawsuit. You want to just mention that?
Well, the board was sued for basically on First Amendment grounds relative to political action committees and the limitations upon the activity that they can engage in, and issues of limits to committees making unauthorized and independent expenditures on behalf of candidates. There was an application in federal court before Judge Sharp for a temporary restraining order against the board to prohibit us from enforcing those provisions, and the Attorney General assisted us in representation in court. I would like to thank Krista Rock and Kelly Monkwitz, who really, in such a short period of time, worked so hard to help Bill and I come to a position and make an appearance in court. And basically, the application to Judge Sharp was denied on a couple of grounds. He went through the papers pretty thoroughly during the hearing and denied their application. So that matter is pending, and I believe that there is an appearance in federal court relative to the complaint in December, as far as I know at this point.
And the key issue here is that based on some of the recent U.S. Supreme Court decisions and decisions in other Circuit Court of Appeals, they were challenging in effect, New York does not allow a political action committee to make direct campaign expenditures. Instead, that the organization has to set up a separate committee,
yes.
And the committee has to disclose the candidates that it is endorsing and has to disclose its expenditures. And that disclosure requirement and the prohibition on making independent expenditures directly by the PAC was the subject of the injunction. And it's a very complicated issue, and based on the federal case law, I thought that you and the Attorney General's office just wrote an excellent brief, and I know that you and Bill worked nights to put together those papers, and I want to acknowledge that. And I think it's a significant victory.
Thank you, Commissioner.
During a very busy time at the office, too, I think that should be noted. Yeah. Wasn't easy.
All right.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else for campaign finance, we'll move to information technology.
George was out there until Dan to come.
I guess, as I always say, no news from information technology is the best news. So that's great. All right, then there's no old business pending. We'll move to new business. The first is a resolution to approve additional funding for temporary contract staff. Does anybody have any questions on the resolution? All right, those in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. All right.
Thank you.
Next is the, you use all these abbreviations, and even I can't undo this
Commission
jargon.
on Quality of Care and Advocacy for Persons with Disabilities.
Thank you.
CQC.
Now, say it loud enough that it,
Commission on Quality of Care and Advocacy for Persons with Disabilities.
All right,
We
this is-
abbreviate it CQC to be short, because there's even longer abbreviations.
all right, and this is the authorization of funds not to exceed $50,000 from our state operations and from HAVA in order to fund these projects. And you want to tell us what the projects are in 2 sentences? Greg, you want to?
You want to outline what you're doing?
Sure, but very briefly, by the way, we're pretty much have everything in place already. In addition to providing technical assistance to the State Board of Elections on issues related to people with disabilities, as well as the local county boards, we're going to also continue to maintain our webpage where we have a lot of election resources, links to the State Board website, etc. In addition to those items, we have taken the films on the operations of the DVDs and the scanners. We've reworked those. We've got some raw footage from SOE software, and we have done a DVD which has all the video, the open caption. It's an open caption DVD on the operation of the BMDs as well as the scanners. The intent of that was to get it out to independent living centers across the state and the county boards. If they wanted to use it for training, it's now in a format that could be displayed on a screen without it looking really fuzzy. It could also be used for local training events, that kind of thing, as well as for duplication for people who may not have access to the internet because of whatever reason. That has been done. I gave a copy to John last month. The other part of the proposal, the new parts of the proposal, are that we're going to have an online survey. It's meant to be kind of a snapshot of people's experiences at the polls. This is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime chance with these major changes, just to kind of see how people felt about it in general terms. It's not meant to focus in on any particular aspect, such as the ramp was too steep or anything like that. It's more of a snapshot type thing about how you felt about the various components, including the access to the poll site, poll worker attitudes, the usability of the BMDs. We are asking that they supply the county and the poll site if they can recollect it. It's 9 questions with drop downs. It is accessible to everyone, including people who are blind. And after that, we'll put together what we've kind of been calling a user's guide, which is probably a misnomer. It's just going to be more of a snapshot, essentially, of how voters with disabilities in the state found the voting experience. Again, it's not meant to be critical. Oh, and the other component is we're really looking for people to give us one positive aspect of the voting experience and one negative aspect of the voting experience. Last time around in the pilot project, we had a lot of anecdotal information from people locally, especially who are blind, that for the first time had voted independently and privately. And those are the kinds of things that we're really trying to capture, and we'll make that report when it's finished available to the board. The survey I think I can safely say is now complete. It's 9 questions, as I said. It's meant to be more of a snapshot rather than a critique of every aspect of the voting experience.
Well, thank you, Greg, and we appreciate your efforts, and we appreciate you coming by to explain them to us.
Thank you.
On the resolution, those you ready to vote on it? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is adopted. The next item on the agenda is discussion on ballot usability. And I added this item to the agenda because I wanted to make sure that we highlight the fact that we are hearing the comments around the state. I think one issue we're aware of is privacy, and I think we're, from our point of view, we understand that that's an issue, and it's one that really is one that addresses training of the inspectors throughout the state. The other issue is we hear comments about the readability of the ballot, and some of them are political in nature, of people who are trying to break down our full-face ballot statute. And I'm unsympathetic to that because I think that some of the experiences outside the country that don't use the full-face ballot show that the full-face ballot is actually more usable for the voter than splitting it up by office, because it's much less likely that a voter is going to skip an office on the full-face ballot. And the best example of that is the Sarasota County, Florida congressional race, where a substantial number of voters skipped the congressional race because of the way that ballot was set up. And if they were using a full-face ballot, I think that kind of problem would not have happened. I also find it interesting that people complain about the full-face ballot when we don't use a full-face ballot in the primary. And they still complain, and that just tells me that there's a political agenda when they talk about the full-face ballot as the reason our primary ballots are not readable, because the one has nothing to do with the other. I think the biggest problem is that we try to put so much on the ballot that the print is often too small, and that there are ways that we could better utilize the available real estate on the ballot. And I've also mentioned the need to get people to use the ballot marking devices. If they need glasses and haven't brought them to the polls, then just use the ballot marking device. One of the comments I have, Anna, that with the counties and the ballot format is that even when there are a small number of races on the ballot and there's lots of blank space on the ballot, we don't blow up the ballot to a larger size to make it more readable. And I also noticed that a lot of the demonstration ballots used a larger size typeface than what we're using for our real ballots in an election. So the ice cream ballot that we use to demonstrate the machines had larger typeface on it than what we're using in the general election. And so I just make those comments to start it off, and I understand that Anna has committed that her staff will make this a priority after the general when we do the evaluation of what we need to change for next year.
I think it's a very important issue, and I know that I don't think we'll be able to change much for November, but I'm hoping that for next year. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say if this was legal or not, but I think just telling you what the office the candidate was running for took like 4 lines, and then the poor name would be there. And maybe we could just say Governor, Attorney General, and I don't know what all the other writing was, truthfully, but it took a lot of space. And this is the first time, out of the chute. You have to give everybody chances. And everybody said the same thing. They'd like the printing to be a little bigger if possible. And if anybody's staff can come up with something better, it will be Anna Savizio's, because nobody works as hard or does as much. So I'm very,
On behalf, thank you.
Very, well, you're welcome, Anna. It's praise that you seldom get and you well deserve. I'm sure that next year we'll be singing a different song here about things like that. There were, at least in Brooklyn and New York City, I think all of the city of New York, there were magnifying envelopes and things, but some of the older people's complaints, like at my church, they all know who I am, so I hear everything, and on Sunday I can imagine. They were saying, they had to hold the glasses with one hand, keep their ballot straight with the other, so they didn't go outside the oval. So they want things a little bigger, and certainly George knew. We told everybody. And the inspectors were very vocal about it. And I know that it will be corrected, as they say, but we have to give people time. The next election is upon us, really. And I'm sure by this time next year we will have everything much better. I have no doubt. I have no doubt. But it is a question that was brought up again and again by the layperson going in to vote.
Anything else? Thank you.
I think we should say we were in the 4 counties and everything was really good. We were in Nassau and we were in the Bronx. The Bronx was running all the time.
I wouldn't say everything was really good, but...
No, it was good. It was much better than I expected.
They thought we were the police.
They thought Kim was there.
I'll say one thing. It was a lot better than the impression that's left after reading the
Yes,
newspapers.
that's what I have to say. It was 100% better than what you would have thought after picking up one of the newspapers.
That most voters had no trouble whatsoever, and most polling places opened on time.
I think somebody said, maybe it was Joanna before, it was people problems. People problems with the new, what do I do now? How do I do this? And even some people didn't mean, we'll walk your ballot over to the machine. And people, I don't need to put it in that folder. I saw people in my phone, I don't want to put it in that folder. Well, you have to, So it were those kind of things that are probably already cleared up. And,
All right, well, the next item on the agenda are enforcement matters. Does anybody want to take up any of those in executive session? All right, so we'll move the adoption of the report from the Campaign Finance Unit.
So moved.
Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I note that one of our determinations on this included an admonition to a police association, a police chiefs association, for making an endorsement of a candidate at a in public with some of the members in uniform, and we've noted that is that the statute prohibits law enforcement officers from participating in political campaigns, and I think we agree that an admonition, a warning, so that that kind of conduct does not happen again in the future is most appropriate. All right. Perhaps we should talk about our next meeting, and then we'll do the executive session. You have the calendar there.
I have it in my phone. You want?
So what do we have in mind? First week of October?
I like Thursdays. Thursdays are the best day of the week for me, for everybody else.
How's the 7th?
7th, first Thursday.
First Thursday, October 7th.
Okay. All right, so tentatively, we're scheduled for noon on